What's that? Who there? Whoa.
So let's shift into Immi then, because I've got so many questions here, and it's such a fascinating product and approach that you guys have taken. So when you think about like the origin story, I read in a few interviews you've been a huge noodle fan your whole life, and that's obviously a big help in helping you understand the landscape. But walk me through how you and your co-founder Kevin thought about the market opportunity, and just as you unraveled it, like why it became just too compelling to pass up.
For sure. And I think throughout this interview, you'll probably hear me refer to him as K-Chan, just because we're both named Kevin. So we've started to append our last names where I'm Kaylee and he's K-Chan, just to make it easier. So K-Chan and I, we met 10 years ago at Kabam, that mobile gaming company. And, we did actually, we always say the story of like, we met because we were on the same team. We didn't know each other. And then when we flew to Vancouver for work trips, we actually ended up at the same like noodle joint for breakfast. A friend actually didn't believe me. She was like, "Did you craft that story?" And I was like, "No, that's literally what happened. Is like we both showed up in the morning of like our first work trip, and we like had no idea who each other were, and we just like showed up at the same ramen restaurant. It was, I think it was like in like a strip mall or something. We were just both eating noodles for breakfast, and that's how we bonded. It's a crazy story, and I don't think we realized until a little bit later that both of us came from food families. So my grandparents are produce farmers in Taiwan. K-Chan is actually, it's much more direct. His grandmother literally ran an egg noodle hawker stall in Thailand, where he used to help out when he was a kid. And then his dad actually used to run a Thai grocery in LA, and then later ran actually like a cloud kitchen selling noodles. So that's pretty much been in his blood, for a lot of his life. And I come more from like the farmer, produce type of the food industry. So I wish I could tell you that we did a ton of category research. We eliminated the competitors. The simple truth is that we actually came together. We knew we wanted to work on a food brand, and we wanted to work on a better for you food brand because both of our families have very high rates of diabetes and high blood pressure. But when it came to picking the product, I distinctly remember he was at my place and we were like, we were sitting at a table and we were like, "What do you want to work on?" And both of us were like, "Let's just work on noodles." Like that's what we both love. And, we hate this feeling where like you have to feel guilty when you eat noodles because they're so carb heavy, and like you drink the ramen broth and it's always like, "Oh, I feel like crap." And so we said, well, let's work on a low carb noodle because that's not something you see in the marketplace. Low carb is important to us because of, the family history with diabetes. And, that's quite literally how the brainstorming started. I think it wasn't until a little bit later in hindsight where we started examining the instant ramen industry and we were like, oh my God, like it's a $46 billion industry. There's effectively 3 conglomerates. They're all Asian conglomerates who own 91% of the market share in the US. And this is like a sleepy category, right? These conglomerates have not changed their formulas in the past 50 to 60 years since instant ramen was invented. And so we kind of looked at that and we said, well, if we can reinvent instant ramen, we can make it low carb, high protein, entirely plant-based. And I'm happy to talk through how we even came across these value props and how we demand tested this idea. But that was kind of the starting point for our journey with Immi.
Yeah, that was the next kind of place I wanted to go, was the product development. And so a few questions within this. The first is, as you guys experimented, because I read the story on your site, you just started cooking noodles and tweaking the recipe and the formulation. As you started that process, how much of that was informed by your grandparents and parents' influence in terms of knowledge that maybe the rest of the market doesn't have, versus you guys just started doing research on your own and throwing ingredients together and trying to actually make something that worked? Talk through that process a little bit.
Is the latter. I think the family history is more so interesting in that, I always say like it's hard to run from like your own blood in a way. Like you can reinvent yourself. You can do a lot of things. I think, there's something funny about like genetics and whatnot. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to go through any of this, but we tell that story because it's like our grandparents were in this industry. Our parents literally immigrated to the US so that we could not be in the food industry. And for some freaking reason, we both couldn't get away from it. Couldn't get away from it. But we did not really have any pre-existing knowledge. Keichin and I are not food scientists. We're not chefs. We really approached this entire process from the ground up. All we had was 10 years of collective experience working in the tech industry, which, some of it is transferable. Most of it is not. But this term gets thrown around a lot. But like from a first principles standpoint, it was really us like first studying, okay, well, how do people make noodles today? A lot of that was just YouTube, reading research reports. We would translate research reports that were in like Chinese or Japanese, and we would just kind of look at how other people have done it. And then, we would start hand rolling. And then at a certain point, we would go talk to other noodle experts. We would literally cold call or cold email, and then they would give us some feedback. And then from there, I think we made like 100 iterations. We got stuck. And then we reached out to a food science PhD and a chef who both, eventually came on board as advisors. But really, again, it's in the food industry, it's no different than in the tech industry in the sense that you can't just go to a general food scientist and expect them to know how to create the food you're trying to make. I liken it to, you can't go to like a C++ engineer and expect them to know, I don't know, Python or something, right? Like they're very specialized in certain ways. And so food science PhD and chef really were there to help improve the process by which we were iterating and formulating. And so I've spoken about this on several other podcasts, but one of my favorite books is a book called The Goal, which is it's really like an industrial engineering book around like it's like a guy has a factory and he has to improve the output, and so like certain levers there are to iterate on to improve the output. And so for us, the food science PhD and chef, what they helped with was they improved our throughput. So they looked at the process by which we were creating new formulations every day, and they said, "Look, you guys could be like 4 times faster than you are simply by doing steps 1, 2, and 3." And they also expanded the knowledge of of ingredients that we were exposed to. So we had a limited knowledge based on our own research, and the chef was like, "Did you know about this protein, this thing, and this thing?" And so it was kind of those two huge levers which got us to version 200 and made us comfortable with quitting our jobs, frankly, and moving forward with a manufacturer.
Yeah, I love that story. So when you think about the kind of values testing, as you mentioned, right? So you hear a lot in the market, better for you. What does that mean? Typically, it could be keto, high protein, low carb, low sodium, plant-based. Like those are all buzzy right now, and for good reason, right? They make people feel better and they're definitely cleaner. And I think a lot of those are core to the way you message the product today. But are there others, and how did you test which ones you wanted to anchor to? Because a lot of it is messaging, of course, but you do want the product to be great for people when they eat it. So just talk through that process as well.
For sure. I think so in the food industry, I think it is fairly important to ensure that there is some sort of macro trend that your product, I guess, accounts for. And, for us, we weren't, I think in the early days, we had a handful of ideas around what value props we wanted our low carb ramen to have. So, we had even thrown around, for example, like gluten-free. Is that going to be important? What we ended up doing was the first round of testing we did at all was simply just throwing up an unbalanced landing page, threw down a couple of value props. We had a friend design a rendering for $20. And we had a widget called Celery that allowed us to collect pre-orders. I think Celery has since been sunsetted, unfortunately. And K-Chen he was a lead PM at Facebook. And so he had some ad credits left over, and we just used them and ran some ads, really just trying to see, hey, are people interested in this product at all? Are they literally going through the pre-order process, putting down their credit card and getting charged for it? And then what we would do is we would email these people, refund them, and we would also ask them, hey, just curious, why did you buy the product? And we learned a lot about the different value props they were interested in, because people would say, oh, I really care about the high protein, or I really cared about the low carb thing that you listed on the website. So that was kind of the qualitative way of gathering some of this data. We took a second quantitative approach, which was we ran a series of ad tests where the first ad test was just to test which audiences were interested in this product. So, are you an audience on Facebook that's interested in physical fitness? Because maybe it's, I'm not sure, like maybe it's for bodybuilders or something. Or is it someone who's interested in like yoga? Maybe it's like a bi-coastal region mom who's maybe of higher income. And so we did different audience testing. And then of the winning audience, we did a second ad test, which was around value props. So we took the winning audiences, and then we started in each ad, we had a different value prop. And we really were just looking for the lowest cost per lead, which was our proxy of saying, okay, that's, if it's the lowest cost per lead, that means the person is the most interested for this value prop. And that's actually how we were able to prioritize, okay, low carb, high protein, plant based were the top three contenders. Everything else, the higher fiber, which we ended up adding because it's just important to us. We think it's an important attribute that most people will slowly grow to understand. Gluten free was not at all like it
It's
was
really
such
surprising.
yeah, exactly. And we were surprised too. We were like, oh, we thought more people would ask about this. But I think it does also match the fact that something like less than 5% of the US population is actually considered gluten free. I don't know how fast that's growing. So I do think we took a little bit more of like this data-driven approach to validate, which value props to focus R&D on before we even built the product.
Yeah, and that feels like it feels like the way you're supposed to do it. I feel like a lot of people just like put their thumb in the air and say like, "Oh, this is the right directional trend," but it sounds like you had a hypothesis, put your foot in the ground, then also validated it with quantitative analysis and those ads. So
Mhm.
that makes a ton of sense.